fire destroyed a chapter of Larry Caputo's life. Larry Caputo, who used to be married to Long Island medium Theresa Caputo, has had a terrible calamity happen to him. A horrible fire breaks out in his house all of a sudden, and it quickly destroys all he owns: his house, his furnishings, his memories, and his dreams. The fire not only burned down a house, but also Larry's dreams that he had clung onto for a long time. He lost a lot of money, and things became so bad that he and his second wife and child had to live in a tent on the street. On such a dangerous day, Larry would have imagined that Theresa, who had once been the most important person in his life, would at least show some compassion. But the truth was harsh. Theresa did not even check on Larry during this tough time. This negligence hurts Larry even more, scorching his soul once more. Larry doesn't say anything to Theresa, though. He is too proud to speak up. He could know that some pains can't be put into words and have to be dealt with in silence. He is standing in the middle of a broken existence now, yet there is still a secret strength in his eyes, the desire to abandon everything and start over. Fire not only burns, but it also gives us the strength to rise from the ashes. Larry Caputo had always thought that life could surprise you, but he never thought it would do so with fire. There wasn't much going on in Huntington, Long Island on Sunday morning. Larry had just prepared coffee, and his second wife, Angela, was feeding their toddler. The sun was shining through the windows of a small house they had constructed together, making it feel comfortable. It wasn't a mansion, but it was their safe place. It was a little house full of second chances, framed pictures, laughing, and dreams that had been fixed. Then the smoke came. At first, it was just a weird fragrance in the hallway. Larry followed it, assuming that maybe he had left the toaster on. But by the time he got to the kitchen, the flames were already licking the walls. The fire blew up in seconds, tearing through the house like a monster waking up. He yelled for Angela to get the baby. They took off running. No shoes. Not enough time to think. Get away of here. In just a few minutes, everything they possessed turned into burning embers and black smoke. His old motorcycle, his late father's military medals, baby albums, old letters, and even the furniture he constructed himself were all gone. They stood on the other side of the street, barefoot and shaking. Larry clutched his screaming infant while Angela held on to him, her face stained with soot. The fire trucks came, but there was nothing they could do. Larry Caputo lost everything for the second time in his life. Larry's life fell apart in the weeks that followed. There was a mistake in the paperwork that caused the insurance claim to be late. His part-time job came to an end. Friends stopped calling. Some neighbors sent food and clothes that were too big for them, but they had their own lives to take care of. Larry finally set up a tent on a peaceful piece of public land at the outskirts of the municipal park since he had nowhere else to go. He tied ropes to a tarp and made shelves out of boxes. The days were long, and the nights were frigid. But the worst thing wasn't the pain, it was the quiet. The type that sneaks in when no one asks if you're okay. As in, did anyone ever really see you?
Raw.
In that quiet, one absence screamed louder than the others. Theresa. Theresa Caputo used to be the most important person in his life. They had been together for 20 years, raised kids, created a brand, and dealt with fame. Larry still believed, hoped, that some ties never really break, even though their paths had diverged. She would definitely call, text, or show up. She must have known about the fire. It was all over the news in the area. The paparazzi even tried to get a picture of him in his tent. But she never got in touch. Not a single word. The fire didn't break Larry, the quiet did. From the one person he imagined would care, even a little. The woman who used to gaze into the spirit world to help people she didn't know, but couldn't understand how much pain the man who used to stand next to her in sickness and health was in. Larry, on the other hand, said nothing. He didn't tell the press, his friends, or even his kid when he inquired if Mom had phoned. He kept it all inside, using his pride as protection. He might have thought that some wounds were too private to talk about. Or maybe he was just tired of looking for empathy that never came. But even in this awful time, something inside Larry wouldn't let go. He started writing again, keeping a record of his ideas by the light of a camping lantern. He assisted people in the tent city build their homes. He showed a local teenager how to fix a bike. That silent strength became stronger over time. He began drawing fresh furniture ideas in an old notebook, picturing a workshop, a business, and a future. Angela saw the change. "You aren't giving up," she commented one morning as she watched him work with what he had found and equipment he had borrowed. "I can't," he said, his voice firm. "If I stop now, the fire wins." Months later, Larry stood in front of a small group of people at a community center. It wasn't their say-so or the media that put on the charity event in writing. It was strangers who had become friends. His voice shook a little as he spoke. "Things went wrong for me this year," he said. "But I learned something important. Fire doesn't merely destroy. It shows. It gets rid of the fake and keeps the true. I was left with only ashes. But we rise from the ashes." People in the audience stood up and clapped for him. Larry Caputo didn't end up rebuilding the same life he had before. He built a new one, smaller, quieter, more purposeful. One where love didn't have any rules. One where pain wasn't wasted, but changed. He never heard from Theresa again. Perhaps she didn't know how to get in touch. She might have chosen not to. But that didn't matter anymore. Larry had turned into his own medium, drawing strength from sadness and hope from destruction. Sometimes, when everything burns down, a better version of the person who was there before comes back. But Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, thought it would be simply another day in her life. For more than 15 years, she had been the link between the living and the dead. She had calmed families who were grieving, sent shivers down their spines with messages, and seen spirits and their loved ones get back together in dramatic ways. But what transpired that Thursday afternoon would upset Theresa to her core in a way she had never felt before. Theresa was in the process of recording a new episode for Lifetime. The team was setting up at a charming family home in Montauk, where she was going to read to a widow named Evelyn in private. Evelyn's husband had died unexpectedly 5 years earlier. When Theresa went in, she felt the normal warmth and buzzing energy that ghosts give forth. Not there. The air was still and quiet. "I don't feel anything," she told her assistant Larry in a low voice, looking around the living room uncomfortably. "He might just be shy." Larry joked to attempt to lighten the mood. But Theresa didn't find it funny. Something was wrong, her gut told her. Theresa sat in front of Evelyn and closed her eyes as the cameras rolled and the reading began. This opened her up to the spiritual world. She said out loud, "I'm asking Spirit to come through. I'm feeling chilled. There is something here, but it's not coming close." She gasped all of a sudden. The air became very frigid. The lights blinked. An incomprehensible force drove the cameraman back, making him drop his gear. Theresa's eyes fluttered open. "This spirit is in my way. I can't understand him." Evelyn held her chest and said, "But why?" "David is my hubby. I have been waiting for this for years." Theresa got up, looking very shaken. "This has never happened in 15 years of doing this." Theresa went outside to clear her head because she was determined not to give up. A pure black raven landed on the hood of her automobile and peered at her at that point. It didn't move. It didn't move. Theresa was brave in most situations, but this one made her feel very afraid. She looked at Evelyn. Did David have anything to do with the occult? Or bad things? Evelyn was unsure. He changed before he died. "I started reading weird literature and spoke with someone online about inviting energy into the house." That was the answer. Theresa understood that what she was dealing with wasn't a trapped soul. It was something much worse. Something that had been with David in life and was still with him in death. Theresa said softly, "I can't help you today. This is more than talking. This is ownership." That night, Theresa went back to her Hicksville home. She lit white candles, brought out her crystals, and did a spiritual cleansing, which was something she didn't do very often for herself. Her phone buzzed while she was meditating. A message from a number I don't know. "Don't bother David. This isn't your place." Theresa looked at it, her hands shaking. At that point, she understood this wasn't just a spirit that didn't respond. This was a sign. The episode never made it to air. Lifetime executives said the tape was unusable due to unexplained malfunctions. A priest eventually blessed the house in Montauk, and Evelyn moved away soon after. Later, Theresa gave a short comment in a private interview. "I've never met anything that didn't want to be heard in all the years I've talked to Spirit. That fought back. I have faith in my skills, but there are some things that just aren't meant to be found." That was the case of Evelyn and David that Theresa Caputo would never forget. But Long Island was scheduled to have a normal Tuesday morning. The weather was shining, the birds were singing, and Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, had signed up for a new cycle class at Cycle Vibe, a fashionable fitness club. No one knew that this session was going to be anything but normal. Theresa strolled into the spin studio with confidence and a huge iced coffee in hand. She was wearing her customary rhinestone-studded gym clothes. She said hello to a few supporters and got aboard bike number 13, which she always said felt good to her energy-wise. The class started with loud, fast music, and the lights were dimmed with neon pulses that matched the pace. The teacher, a cheerful young woman named Jade, began to shout things like, "Leave your stress on the pedals. Push harder than your problems." The room was full of enthusiasm. But for Theresa, something else was getting stronger. Theresa sat up straight on her bike around 10 minutes in, as she was riding hard and wiping sweat from her forehead. Her eyes got bigger. She could see more than just the faint glimmer of LED lights now. A cool breeze blew past her neck, which was weird in a room full of people. She let out a quiet gasp. She said, more to herself than anybody else, "There's someone here." Jade, who thought Theresa meant someone had come in late, yelled happily, "Yes. We love people that join at the last minute." But Theresa wasn't talking about the dead. Theresa rose up on her pedals in the middle of the second song and stayed still. She started to cry. She cautiously turned to her left and looked straight at a young woman next to her who was shocked. Theresa replied in a low, solemn voice, "Your grandmother is here. She has a red rosary and says she's sorry she didn't say goodbye." The woman on bike 12 almost fell off her seat. "What? Oh my God. My grandma died last year. She always prayed with a red rosary," she added, horrified. The whole class stopped. The music even seemed to fade into the background. Jade shut off the speakers and looked confused. Is everything all right?" Jade asked with a hesitant tone. Theresa stood upright, with sweat streaming down her face, but her mind was clear. "There's more," she said. "Someone's uncle died very suddenly from a heart attack, and he's showing me a watch. He says he can still hear the Beatles." A other man near the back of the class started to cry. "Uncle Joe. He was crazy about the Beatles. He passed away last spring, and I got his old watch." What happened next was nothing short of spiritual anarchy. Theresa, who was still on her spin bike, started giving messages to others as if she were leading a mediumship session at SoulCycle. "Yes, dogs come through too, hon. Someone's dog named Max is here. I'm getting the name Nancy. She is happy of how far you've progressed since she died in 2018. The teacher ultimately gave up on the class and sat on the floor with her legs crossed, observing in astonishment. Some of the students were crying, while others were filming. After roughly 25 minutes of spiritual insights, the energy appeared to calm down. Theresa dried her eyes, nodded, and said, "Okay, they are backing off now. Spirit's done for the day for now." The students clapped, some out of appreciation and some out of bewilderment. Cycle Vibe changed their website later that day. Every Tuesday morning, come to Spirit Spin with Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium. Expect aerobics, catharsis, and maybe even your grandma. When asked about it, Theresa, who was outside the studio drinking another iced coffee, chuckled. "What can I say? Spirit never stops, not even while I'm riding a bike." Long Island's favorite medium kept surprising everyone, showing once again that you never know when spirit will show up, even when you're just trying to lose weight. But Long Island had a warm Friday night, and the ocean breeze brought the smell of salt and summer to a small Italian restaurant on a corner near the shore. Theresa Caputo had planned a quiet dinner with her mother, Conchetta, and a few of her mother's oldest friends, women Theresa had known since she was a little girl. They were going to eat good food, tell stories from the old neighborhood, and laugh. But Theresa Caputo's nights were never typical. Not when ghosts wanted to talk. They sat at a circular table in the corner with plates of pasta, glasses of wine, and a lot of talk about arthritis and grandkids. Theresa sat between her mother and her Aunt Carmela, smiling pleasantly and listening when she suddenly felt it. A change. A presence. Someone had come through. Theresa blinked and moved forward a little, her fingers reaching the base of her wine glass. Okay, I wasn't going to say anything, she continued in a calm but alert voice, but someone's husband is stepping forward, and he is not letting me enjoy my eggplant parm. Everyone looked. Her mother rolled her eyes and said, Theresa, we talked about this. Just one night without the spirits. But Aunt Carmela slowly looked up, her eyes getting bigger. What do you mean, a husband? He keeps pointing to a red tie, like he always wore this red tie to special events, Theresa said. He's showing me he died of heart failure. The group stopped talking. That's Salvatore, Dolores murmured, her voice breaking. My Sal always wore a red tie to church on Easter. Theresa nodded. He says he's with the dog you buried in the backyard. What was it, a scooter? Dolores gasped. Scotty. Oh my God, Scotty died 2 months before Sal. Half of the people at the table gasped in amazement and uneasy laughter. One of the women crossed herself, while another reached for her drink. She smiled softly. He says thank you for putting his picture in the hallway. He also says to stop yelling at the TV because he still watches Jeopardy with you. Dolores was crying and holding a napkin. I yell because I know the answers, Theresa. Theresa stretched out and took her hand. He knows. And he loves that. There were more messages. One friend got a message from her brother, who died in a car accident in the 1980s. Another heard from her father, who thanked her for forgiving him for not being there. The table, which had been full of gossip and pasta sauce, was suddenly full with feelings, healing, and disbelief. The waiter even stopped with a platter in hand and said to another server, Isn't that the ghost lady from TV? As the night came to a close and the desserts were put away and the coffee was served, Theresa's mom gazed at her daughter with pride in her eyes. You can never just come over for dinner like a normal person. Ma, I tried, Theresa said with a giggle as she sipped her latte. But they come no matter what. And between the veal piccata and the cheesecake, a group of women departed the restaurant feeling lighter, happier, and with warmer hearts. Not simply because they were friends, but also because they knew that love never dies. But Theresa Caputo arrived at the Velvet Curtain, a prominent LGBTQ+ lounge in Brooklyn, on a cool spring afternoon. The owner, Rico, had invited her to see a charity performance, but he didn't tell the queens why she was actually there. Theresa walked in wearing her usual stilettos and huge blonde hair. She could feel the spirits right away. Her hands tingled, and the hairs on her arms rose up. Getting ready backstage, performers were putting on makeup, fixing their lashes, and taping down wigs. But one queen stood out from the rest. Aurora Devine was her name, but off-stage, she was known as Jason. That day, Jason was unusually quiet. He sat in front of the mirror and stared at a fading picture pinned to the side of it. It showed a woman in a nurse's uniform holding a baby. Jason, Rico continued softly, Theresa Caputo is here and wants to meet you. Jason turned and smiled a little. Oh, the lady in the middle? I saw her on TV. When Theresa walked into the room, her voice broke through the noise of people talking backstage. Hey, sweetie, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have someone here who won't let me stop talking. Jason blinked, not sure. Theresa's eyes were glued to his. Did your mother die all of a sudden? She shows me a white rose, which stands for a quick departure, and says she didn't got to say goodbye. Jason's face dropped. Theresa took a deep breath and held her heart. She says she's been watching your shows. Yes, in full glam, honey, and she's so proud of you. But she says you've been feeling bad about it. Something about not being in the hospital? Jason's eyes filled with tears. I was on tour in Chicago. She didn't tell me she was sick because she didn't want to concern me. Theresa smiled gently. Tell my baby I never felt alone, she says. I felt cared for. I saw the flowers you put on my grave every March. Jason started to cry. How could she know that? She does, Theresa said in a low voice. She's showing me a picture of you as a kid dancing in her shoes and pearls. She says she always knew who you were, even when no one else did. She claims, I didn't raise a boy who became a drag queen. I raised a beautiful soul who makes other people feel seen. The whole backstage was quiet, and every performer was holding their breath. Jason, she's with you when you perform. She loves you the most. And she says to tell you, I might not be able to sew your dresses anymore, but I sew stars into your sky. Don't ever stop shining. Jason cried and smiled at the same time. That's something she would say. The audience in the dressing room clapped, not for a show, but for a healing. Aurora Devine's performance that night had a different type of power. Everyone said they felt a soft wind, like the brushing of angel wings, when she appeared on stage in white feathers and sparkling rhinestones. What about Theresa? She sat silently in the back, smiling as the soul of a mother watched her daughter shine in the spotlight, proud, free, and finally at peace. Hello, lovely viewers. I'm Mina, and I hope your day is going well. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the video.